Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Irene and I'm a registered dietitian, and today we have another pediatric nutrition case study on the topic of malnutrition. As always, these case studies are 100% made up but based on a variety of my experiences. So for today's scenario, we have patient G, who is an 18-month-old term boy who's being admitted from clinic for clean out and poor weight gain. There is concern for malnutrition and patient has been followed in GI clinic for management of constipation. Patient's current bowel regimen consists of Miralax daily and enemas as needed. At his follow-up appointment, he was found to not have weight gain since his previous appointment 6 months prior. Patient's parents report that patient's constipation initially got better, but has worsened again and caused patient's intake to decline. At his previous appointment, patient's anthropometrics were 9.8 kilos in weight and 76 centimeters in length. At today's visit, patient's anthropometrics are 9.9 kilos and 82 centimeters in length. So the first thing that I'm going to want to do is to take a look at his anthropometric measurements. We have 2 data points, which is really great because that gives us a lot of information. I am going to plug in his first data points from his first appointment in GI. So when he was, we're gonna assume 12 months old, he was 9.8 kilos and he was 76 centimeters long. So as you can see, he was plotting very well along about the 50th percentile in terms of weight, length, and weight for length. So he was doing phenomenal. Now at his follow-up appointment, he is 18 months old now. He is 9.9 kilos and now 82 centimeters. So you can see that his length is still doing relatively well. It's close to the 50th percentile. However, his weight has really fallen off the curve and it is only plotting at the 19th percentile. His weight for length thus has also declined as well and is plotting at the 13th percentile. So with this information, we're also going to want to determine his weight gain velocity and also length gain velocity. So that's going to help us to just see where he's at and whether he's meeting his goals. More than likely he's not. So looking at his weight gain, he's gained 100 grams over the last, we're going to assume 6 months is 183 days. So he's gained 0.5 grams per day over the last 183 days. In terms of his length, he has grown 6 centimeters over 183 days, which is about 0.033 centimeters per day over the last 183 days. So for someone his age, his weight gain goals are going to be 5 to 10 grams per day, and his length gain goals are going to be about 0.03 to 0.04 centimeters per day. Based on the weight gain velocity that we just calculated, he's definitely not meeting his goals, and we can see that on his growth curve, if we were to plot it, he would be falling off the curve. In terms of height though, he's still doing relatively well and he's kind of plotting along where he has been in the past. So that is somewhat reassuring that he is more acutely malnourished versus severely malnourished. In peds, there are a couple different ways to diagnose malnutrition, and there's this really nice chart online that I found, and we have something similar at our hospital that basically has all this information summarized in a similar way. So in terms of weight for height z-score, it is currently negative 1.23, so he falls under the mild malnutrition category. Based off of that, BMI for age is not relevant in his age group because he is less than 2 years old. In terms of length and height, he's still plotting very well, so he is in the 50th percentile and his z-score is currently negative 0.1, so he does not qualify there. We did not get a mid-arm circumference on him. We don't have that data. In terms of weight gain velocity, so he is under 2 years old, so we can still use this criteria. He is actually meeting less than 25% of the norm weight gain for his expected age. So our goals, the 5 to 10 grams per day and the 0.03 to 0.04 centimeters per day, those goals are based off of the expected weight gain for someone his age, and those are just based off of the regular growth curves like the WHO and the CDC. He would meet severe malnutrition based on this category. He's not quite 2 yet, so we cannot use the weight loss. We can also look at deceleration in weight for length z-score. So he was previously at 0.12 and now he's negative 1.23. So that was a decline of 1 z-score, so he also falls under mild malnutrition for this one. In terms of inadequate nutrient intake, it's a little bit harder to assess. You can probably get a diet recall, but unless he's taking a lot of formula, and that's mostly what he is getting his nutrition from, this is a little bit variable and can differ based on who is calculating and who is also giving the history. This one is a little bit harder to use, and I don't find myself using this as much as some of the other ones. And I do feel like we have adequate data right here to give him a malnutrition diagnosis. So I'm always going to go with the most severe diagnosis, so I will say that he's severely malnourished, but I am also going to cite some of the other things that put him under the mild malnutrition category as supporting evidence for our malnutrition diagnosis. So now with this information, we can go ahead and go and speak with family and just kind of get a little bit more of a background and history on exactly how he's been doing and how his nutrition has been at home. Let's say we go in and we talk with mom who's there, and mom reports that patient eats solids by mouth and used to have a really good appetite, but lately due to constipation has not been eating well. Mom states that 2 months ago, patient's PCP prescribed periactin as an appetite stimulant, but they have not seen any improvements. So the following is the diet recall that we obtain from parents who report current intake as about half of what patient used to eat. So for breakfast, he has half of a pancake and half of an egg. His morning snack is just a couple pretzels, maybe a couple of bites really. For lunch, he has 2 chicken nuggets and 1 ounce of broccoli. His afternoon snack is half of a 4-ounce yogurt. For dinner, he has a third of a bowl of spaghetti, and throughout the day, he drinks about 8 ounces of whole milk and 12 ounces of water. Occasionally, parents will give him a little bit of diluted juice, but that's really not super frequent. And mom is giving him a daily multivitamin, which he does take. As you can see, based on this history, his intake is fairly small even for a toddler. From this information, we can kind of gather that patient's poor intake is related to the constipation and would probably improve once the constipation is resolved. So if patient continues to have constipation and poor intake though, additional nutrition intervention may be needed to make sure that he's meeting his needs. So what I would probably do in this scenario, this is like my first time seeing them, is I would want to make sure that we are first meeting adequate fluid needs. So Miralax is an osmotic laxative, so that means that it draws in water to the intestines so that it can help with passing bowel movements. If he's not having adequate fluid intake, the Miralax is not really going to work as intended, and it sounds like he's not super great about drinking fluids. I would probably want him to meet a little bit higher and close to our holiday Seeger goals. I can also counsel on a high fiber diet, and that can help with bowel movement sometimes. It doesn't always work, and it kind of depends on the reason why this patient is having constipation. For some patients, the constipation is more so that they are withholding their stool. They're choosing not to have a bowel movement. For other kids, maybe they have certain diagnoses like Hirschsprung, so they're not able to have bowel movements regularly. There's a lot of different things. Diet counseling kind of depends on the reason why they're having constipation. If it is a very straightforward constipation kid where there's not all these underlying medical things going on, then this is when a high fiber diet may come into play and may actually help the patient. In other cases, this may not really be helpful. As for the weight gain, I can also counsel mom on some high calorie foods, maybe just adding some extra butter or oil to the foods, feeding very high calorie foods like peanut butter and avocado, all those types of things. We can also talk about additional nutrition supplements like Pediatric or Carnation Instant Breakfast, things that will provide fluid as well as extra calories. A more invasive nutrition intervention, which I would probably hold off on, especially if this is the first time that I'm seeing this kid and this isn't something that's a super chronic problem, that we have kind of exhausted all of our other options, is an NG tube for like nocturnal feeds or additional feedings throughout the day. So typically I reserve these because it is somewhat more invasive. You do have to place a tube. Not all parents are okay with that, but if we aren't able to get enough nutrition in him and this is becoming a long-term problem where this is causing his growth to be stunted, this is when this would come into play. So you can place an NG tube to make sure that we are getting in some additional nutrients in him if he's not able to take all of his calories and gain weight appropriately by mouth. Of course, we also have to make sure that his underlying constipation issues are solved before this as well, because we don't want to just keep feeding through an NG tube while he is backed up, because that sounds like a recipe for disaster. So based off of this history, we can kind of guess that he is not meeting his estimated needs. Because he's a relatively healthy child, he's got no other past medical history. It's just this constipation thing, really. I would base his needs off of the DRI. In 2023, they did come out with new ER equations, which you can find on Google. So he falls under the 6 months to 3-year-old category. So I will just really plug everything in there. So you get that he needs a total of 896 kcals per day. And of course, everything in peds is in kcals per kilogram or something per kilogram. So divide that by his current weight and get 90.5 kcals per kilogram. So I am going to base his needs off of this. I will say that he needs about 90 to 95 kcals per kilogram per day. I added a little bit extra just for a little bit of catch-up growth because he probably needs it. Something to also consider is adjusting the anthropometric goals. If there is really this huge need for catch-up growth, a way that you can do this is you can multiply our age goals by 1.2 to 3. So that's like a multiplier. I usually stick with about 1.5 as my multiplier. So his new weight gain goal would be 7.5 to 15 grams a day for catch-up. And this would just be basically until he's back to where he was before, around the 50th percentile. In terms of fluid needs, I'm going to use Holiday Seeger. For him is super easy because for the first 10 kilos, it is the weight times 100. So he just needs 990 milliliters a day. And this is the equivalent of 33 ounces. So for him, I'm gonna want him to meet at least 85-ish% of his fluid requirements. And that kind of brings us into our recommendations. So I would want him to continue with his regular diet appropriate for age. Sounds like he's been eating pretty appropriate foods at home, so I'm not super concerned. We can add some high calorie foods and high fiber foods into the diet and encourage him to eat these to see if they'll help with his constipation. We also want to encourage fluid intake of at least 28 to 30 fluid ounces a day to meet 85 to 90% of his fluid requirements. So this is where we're using the Holiday Seeger. We will also trial some Pediatric with fiber, PO ad lib for a goal of 1 to 2 cans a day to meet 25 to 50% of his estimated needs. So this is just gonna help him to get some extra calories and fiber in if he's really not feeling like eating, and that'll also help with some of the fluid as well. If patient continues with poor intake and weight gain, we may need to consider an NG tube placement and nocturnal feedings, but I would defer this to the future. I wouldn't necessarily give Rex at the moment because I don't feel like it's super necessary. I kind of want to try all these other interventions before we get to that point, but I think that it's good to mention and just kind of think about. So that concludes this case study. If you're looking for more content like this, I have a ton on my channel. Just look for the dietetics playlist, and I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to give it a like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!